into data, so come down the rabbit hole with me. This is a project that was done in partnership with the Chamber and the Resort Tax District. It was initiated because we wanted to be able to look at community-specific data to Big Sky. So what is publicly available, and the factors that we looked at were labor force, quality of life, variables, and then comparison cities. And I kind of want to see my slides, so I'm going to stand up here. And then we chose comparison cities to look at. We looked at Telluride, Jackson Hole, and Sun Valley. So first I'm going to start by talking about the data because it's really important to understand the limitations of data. I think, our world, we take data as fact, but there are limitations to what data can do, what data can tell us. And so for this profile, we used locally available data. We used the Resort Tax District data. We used bed tax collections. We used local housing prices through MLS listings. And then we actually used sales tax collection data from the Colorado Association of Ski Towns. And that's how we did our comparison, some of the comparison stats. And then we also looked at federal data, US Census Bureau data from the American Community Survey. There are limitations to that federal data, and it's important to understand. The first is the Census Bureau draws a boundary around Big Sky called a census designated place. And that is supposed to act as a city boundary. But that census designated place, which is this map that you see right there, map there, is not perfect. It doesn't align with all the other special districts that are in Big Sky. And so there's only a certain amount of apples to apples comparison that you can do. Other things about the Census Bureau data that's important to understand is that it's looking at a small sample size, and so you can get large margins of error. But it's data, the data that we have, and so let's start somewhere and start with that data. And then the other limitation to it is it does lag behind. So in March of this year, the Census Bureau published their 2020 estimates. And so most of what we're going to be looking at is from 2020. All right, we're going to kick it off with just basic demographics, looking at Big Sky, Gallatin, Madison, and Montana. A few key things to note here are the average ages. So here, Big Sky has a really young average age at 36. Gallatin is even younger than Big Sky, and Madison County has an older average age at 53. And that's important when you're trying to understand a community. So you're looking at what the workforce is doing. The Madison County workforce is looking more towards retirement versus the Big Sky and Gallatin County workforces are in the prime of their careers, they're working, things like that. The other thing that is really important and actually really interesting to note is this 10-year population growth change. So Big Sky has had the largest population growth of anything I've looked at. The population doubled in 10 years. It is absolutely crazy. And this is year-round full-time residents. So it's not accounting for seasonal travel or second homeowners that don't live here year-round. So if you remember last year, or 2 years ago, I guess, we did the census. We filled out like our census questions and they say, do you live here year-round? So that's what that's capturing. Gallatin County is as known for significant growth. We get national attention around that, but it's only 27% growth in 10 years. And then Madison County and Montana are a lot lower than that. So next is, what's the labor force doing? So one thing that we, as a national dialogue, have been hearing a lot about are, where are the workers? Why aren't they working? And usually you see unemployment rates as a labor force statistic. But unemployment rates leave out, to me, they leave a lot to be desired, because unemployment rates are only capturing individuals who are looking for work. What they aren't doing is they're not capturing any of the individuals that have stopped working. So if you weren't able to find childcare, or childcare is really expensive and it's cheaper for you to actually stay home and take care of your children, it's not capturing those individuals. And so labor force participation rates do capture that. And I think those are more helpful rates to look at if you're a business looking at recruitment or hiring. It helps you understand more about the labor force. So labor force participation rates look at the entire population from 16 to 65 and what percent of that population is working. And then the working population is the unemployed and the employed statistic together. So the labor force participation rates tell you how much of the entire population is working. The US on average is at 63%. Big Sky is a whopping 84%. Their stat right there. Gallatin County is right behind at 71%, and then Madison County is actually lower than the national labor force participation rate. But again, we can remember that the average age is a lot higher, a lot older, so that workforce is aging and looking towards retirement. And then Montana follows pretty much the national average. So this tells me that people are working. Only 16% of people in the community aren't working. That is astounding. And there's 5 reasons why people don't work. The first is they're going to school. So we tend to see students participating less in the workforce. The second is they're disabled. The third is they're staying at home to take care of their family. Fourth is they've retired. And then the fifth is an others or catch-all category that might have to do with transportation or something like that. Labor force participation rates are fascinating. There's a lot going on in this graph, but I'm going to break it down. When you're a business and you're saying, where is our labor force? You can look at labor force participation rates and use them to think about how you're targeting recruitment to different populations. So here is the total population. That's these 4 bars, and the colors are the regions. The first glance, right? What are the lowest? Well, we see our students, that 16 and 19-year-old there, have pretty low labor force participation rates. And same with our retirees here. So 65 to 74 and then above 75 and older. Low labor force participation rates there, but both are to be expected. One is a student, one is a retiree. And so then we're looking at the bulk of our workforce here, and you can kind of say, okay, who's low, and can we use that as a targeted recruitment? So you can see Madison County labor force participation rates in these age breakdowns tend to lag behind the rest of the region, and so maybe there is some opportunity to recruit from Madison County. There's also Big Sky, there, you guys, this is just crazy. 100% participation rates from Big Sky for some of these age categories. But I think that there's lots of opportunity to recruit from Madison County and even Montana. Can we think about what jobs that we can do remotely, and can we hire other Montanans for those jobs? And also looking at, let's see, this age bracket, sorry, I'm getting confused which one's the pointer. Looking at this age bracket, 55 to 59, this is interesting. I've heard about a phenomenon of like early retirement in COVID. Did people start retiring early? This is saying, yeah, kinda. So are there things that we can do to make those work schedules flexible for those individuals, entice them back into the workforce, things like that. The other interesting way to break down labor force participation rates is by gender. And so this next slide is looking at the total population versus male and female. It is very typical that females participate in the labor force at lower rates because they're the primary caregivers, and this is reflected here. So you can see this whole section is just generally lower than the males here. However, there is an opportunity with some of the, maybe targeting a female recruitment out of Madison County, there might be opportunity there. And I think this encourages businesses to look at providing childcare. And so speaking of childcare, you can also break labor force participation rates down by individuals with children. And the way that the Census Bureau breaks it out is basically children under 6, so under school age, and then children of school age. The interesting thing, this is really interesting, when it's fairly equal. So it's telling you that there's not a significant difference between the two populations of having a kid underage and a kid in school. They are lower though, if you can see kind of the average hovers around that 70%. So I think that there's huge opportunity for businesses to think about providing childcare all along the spectrum, whether it's from family-friendly policies to on-site childcare, with a middle ground being maybe some level of like subsidized support for supporting the cost of childcare for their employees. Okay, so next, moving into employment by industry, there's a lot going on in this slide. So I'm going to highlight a few things. This table is looking at jobs by industry. And when economists tend to think about this is important because the way that jobs are distributed throughout industries in our society tells us how resilient our communities can be against natural disasters. So for example, well, we all lived through COVID, but another example is the flooding. Gardner has been predominantly tourism-based, and they've really felt the effects of flooding and the impacts on their employment. And so this is important to look at, and one strategy to build a more resilient community, more resilient tax base, is to help bring in jobs that are in other industries. So when we look at this, this arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodation, food services is where tourism lies. And the rank here is the percentage of the total jobs in the community. So tourism, this industry classification is definitely the largest for Big Sky and the largest for Madison there. In Montana, it's third. In Gallatin County, it's second. This educational services, healthcare, and social assistance is interesting because it's the industries that make up a community. They're the things that make us want to stay in a community, the healthcare that's provided, the teaching, things like that. And so that is important to have, and I love seeing that it's second in Big Sky. I think it speaks to the fact that Big Sky has really been evolving over time from a tourist town to a place that people are putting down their roots. And so then next we want to look at retail, because retail is part of that tourism sector. And so when you add up the retail and the tourism jobs here and here, Big Sky's share is 52.8%. So that says that there's a lot of employment in the tourism industry and that there's opportunity to build some diversity into the industries. And then when we look at Gallatin, do the same thing for Gallatin. Gallatin's share is 26%, Madison's share is 30%, and then Montana's share is 23.6%. So you can tell that our region is really dominated by tourism. No surprise to you all though, you're living it. So, then just some other workforce statistics that we can look at. The first is educational attainment. This is super fascinating to me. I didn't know this before I did this study. So Big Sky, look at that huge percentage of individuals here that have degrees. This is highlighting the associate's, bachelor's, and graduate level studies. And I think this is a huge asset to the workforce. So employers could be utilizing the highly educated population that they have, providing career tracks for the workforce. This graph below is also really interesting. So this is produced by the Census Bureau. This particular picture, it lags behind. So it's a 2019, it's not a 2020 data. But what this tells us is it tells us of the people working in the community who's coming in from outside the community, who's working, living and working in the community, and who's living and leaving the community to work. So this orange stat here are individuals that live outside of this district and are traveling in to work to Big Sky, and that percentage is 66%. And so that is a really, transportation is the thing. You guys know that. We're going to talk about it on the next slide. And then these are the number of people that are living in the community, working in the community, and then this is the number of people living in the community, working outside of the community. So you could be working from home, or you could be driving into Bozeman to work. And transportation is really important to consider. I think this is typically a silent cost that the workforce pays. It's not often tabulated and accounted for what the actual cost of commuting to your job is. And it also speaks to the importance to be able to provide public transportation throughout the county because the workforce is living in the county and coming into Big Sky to work. So this section here shows public transportation and the carpooling, and you can see it's so much bigger than the rest of these comparisons. That's an itty little bitty section there. And that is important. I think that that's support for the Skyline that comes up here and other public transportation. And I think it's also an opportunity for businesses to consider, do you want to be able to, do you want to subsidize some of that transportation for your workforce? So part of what we wanted to do was be able to look at this localized data and make recommendations to businesses because the workforce has been a struggle right now. And we've talked about that as we've talked through here, but this is just a summary slide of those things. Other things we haven't touched on yet are there's an opportunity to support the students. Students have much lower labor force participation rates, so do education stipends attract them, do flexible schedules attract them, and then doing targeted workforce recruitment in the area we talked about. And then there's a slide a little bit later to talk about the employer-provided health insurance. And in the profile, there's a pretty extensive breakdown of that too, if you're interested in those. All right, next, median household income. So Big Sky tops the list of the region at $80,000 for 55 in 2020. But the gap between Big Sky and Gallatin isn't very much, and the cost of living here are a little bit higher. We're gonna see, let's see the next slide, the single-family home prices. And this is over time, so it's looking at monthly average single-family home prices from January 2020 through December of 2021. And at the time, single-family home prices in Big Sky topped $3 million. Which is really unaffordable. So if you take a look at the median family home price here, median family income here, and break it down to what affordable monthly housing payment would be, it's $2,011, and that is based on HUD's definition of affordability being 30% of your monthly costs. So really rough mortgage math. Basically, that breaks down to a mortgage of $525,000. That's 20% down, that's 4% interest rates, which we know interest rates are higher than that now. It's a 30-year fixed mortgage, and it doesn't include HOA payments and PMI. And so that is the really rough, absolute max mortgage that would be considered affordable using the average household income in Big Sky. Other fast housing facts, in 2020 there were 3,500 units in Big Sky, and this is where the second homeowners thing shows up. So there's a 57% vacancy rate and about 1,500 units that were occupied. On this graph here, this shows the breakdown of the different regions of the occupied units, who's an owner and who's a renter. So the dark section are owners and the light section are renters. Big Sky, pretty average. The Madison County, there's a significant more ownership split. In Madison County, Big Sky's numbers are, there's 63% are occupied and 36% renter occupied. This breakdown shows the housing stock. What's the composition of the housing stock? Frequently around the country we see that mobile homes are an affordable means of housing and also multi-unit buildings. And so we can see how Big Sky stacks up against everyone else. Big Sky has a lot of 2 units or more and then no really mobile home availability. But you can see that Gallatin County has a nice share here, and Montana actually has a much larger share of mobile home units. And then I'm going to kind of fly through this. This is just a nice breakdown of the monthly housing costs. It shows basically the distribution of who's paying, what's the range of people that own and rent, how many, where do they fall. Here we can highlight the median monthly cost for renters. So Big Sky is the most, followed by Gallatin, Madison, and then Montana. and then also for owners. So again, Big Sky is the most, followed by Gallatin, and then Madison is actually after that, or sorry, Montana's after that, with Madison coming in as the most affordable monthly housing costs. The other thing that's interesting is to compare the financial fabric of individuals that own homes. So you can look at who has second home, or who has a second mortgage, who has a home equity loan. And this is actually really positive. This to me tells me that individuals that own homes are in a good financial position. They haven't over leveraged themselves. And so if they have some resiliency through financial ups and downs that may come, there's only 36 individuals that on this statistic that have a home equity loan. And there's a good bulk of people that don't have a home equity loan or a second mortgage. The next thing we looked at is cost of living. So this is maybe the only statistic that isn't specific to Big Sky in this report. And it's because the feds do not publish an official cost of living stat. And so you have to use private calculators to estimate these things, and they only do it at the county level. However, your local chamber is currently doing a study. They've hired a consultant to look at what the cost of living in Big Sky is. But you can kind of see where Gallatin and Madison County falls. The next thing we looked at is tourism. So we used the lodging tax collections. Lodging tax collections are an 8% tax on the various forms of lodging that's available. 4% goes to the general fund, and 4% is what we call the bed tax. And so when you graph it over time, you can actually see how the tourism industry performs in Big Sky. Q1 is by far the highest. That's not a surprise. People are skiing. And Q2 is the lowest collections. What's interesting, though, is that the Department of Commerce buckets Montana in tourism regions. And so we fall in a Yellowstone Country tourism region. The Yellowstone Country tourism region leads Montana in the amount of collections that come out of the bed tax. And then Big Sky leads the tourism district. So Big Sky does 25% of the total Yellowstone Country region, with Bozeman right behind that. To me, it's astounding the amount of jobs that those collections produce. It's just fantastic. It's a highly productive and really hardworking community. So the next, I'm just going to introduce you to the comparison cities that we looked at. We looked at Sun Valley, Idaho. You can see the population there and the average age. Sun Valley is significantly older, but more comparable in size. Jackson Hole is larger, but more comparison in the average age. And then Telluride is pretty close, is a pretty good analog to Big Sky. These are just some fast stats here. So no surprise, nobody experienced the growth that Big Sky experienced in the last 10 years. Big Sky leads the region in the median household income when you look at the comparison stats. And then Big Sky actually is second with labor force participation rates. So Jackson Hole's just a notch above Big Sky with their labor force participation rates. And then this graph is my favorite. It's a little complex, so let me explain it. We were able to look at the sales tax collections across Big Sky, Sun Valley, Telluride, and I'm totally blanking on this last city, Jackson Hole. And it's not necessarily helpful to look at total collections because the geographic regions that those collections happen in aren't comparable. But what is interesting is to look at the percent change from quarter to quarter in those collections. And the reason that is interesting is because the goal is to build a stable economy where you have tourism that is continuous across all quarters. And so the more swings you have, the larger percentage increases and decreases you have, the more opportunity that the community has to be able to build activities that can attract tourists throughout an entire year. And so that's what this is graphing. This is graphing the percent change of those sales tax collections across quarters. And it's really interesting because actually Jackson Hole, this orange here, is really kind of looking the most stable. Telluride is right there too. And you can see Big Sky has these wild swings, which means there's lots of opportunity from quarter 1 and quarter 2 to quarter 3 to be able to even those tax collections out. And that's where a community can get creative about what kind of things do you want to offer, how do you want to advertise, what activities do you want to do during Q2 to maybe raise those collections. And then this is the health insurance coverage that I wanted to talk about. So this is looking at, this breaks out the labor pool into 2 parts. The first is the employed here, this is that first section. And then unemployed is this second section here. And you can see, depending on where individuals fall, what type of insurance coverage they have. So private, public, and then not covered. And this is an opportunity for Big Sky employers right here. You can see this is the largest percentage of employed individuals that are covered by public insurance. This is telling me their employers are not offering them insurance through work. So that is definitely an opportunity for attraction and workforce retention. However, the thing I do like to see is that this is pretty low. There's employed, only 8% of employed people aren't covered, where Sun Valley and Jackson Hole are much higher percentages. And then this is just a quick look at housing in comparison cities. So it's breaking down of the occupied units, owner-occupied versus renter-occupied. And this is interesting because it tells you something about the transitoriness of your workforce. I think I just made that word up. So here, 63% of the occupied households are owner-occupied, which to me is good for Big Sky. It tells me that people are rooted, they're invested, they're living here, they're not going anywhere. And when you look at more transitory communities like Jackson Hole, you might be able to recruit from there. And so Jackson Hole and Telluride here have higher renter-occupied rates than they do owner-occupied rates. And this is really interesting statistic about Sun Valley. This tells me that they are pretty rooted. So maybe Sun Valley is not the place you want to target your workforce recruitment from. And then when you're thinking about targeting that recruitment, this is another piece of positive information. Big Sky has the lowest median monthly renter housing cost. So you can, what? Oh, yeah, sorry, 2 years ago. So maybe there's potential to recruit from these other communities, say, hey, we have lower rental housing costs. And so, that would be the last piece of information there. So that concludes the brief overview of data. Thanks so much. If you guys want to dive deep and get a lot more narrative, we are going to be publishing the economic profile. It'll be posted on both the Big Sky Area Resort Tax District website and the Big Sky Chamber website. So. And I think we have questions, right? Okay. Sure. Okay. So you can ask questions if you're online. You can ask questions in the audience, and we'll just tackle it. All right, I'll start. Well, can I take questions from the audience and just repeat it? Is that how you want me to do it? Okay, go ahead.
In one of your earlier slides, you had owner-occupied rental and vacant. Where would short-term rental, would they be considered, out of those 3 categories, would they be considered vacant?
Yes. Okay. So the question was, on the slide, there were occupied units and vacant units, and where would short-term rentals fall? They fall under vacant units because they are not owner-occupied.
Really fascinating. I really enjoyed it. I think recruiting from Jackson is a great idea, too. But I was wondering, I'm sorry if you said this in the beginning, but could you say again, kind of where the data comes from?
Yeah.
And how frequently can you update it, to the point on the rental data being a little old?
Yes.
How frequently, could we update all that?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so one question, basically. Where does the data come from? Just review that, and then how often can we update it? But I had a thought about Jackson that I forgot to share, so can I talk about Jackson first? Okay. So back here, there is also, I think, an opportunity. This is not the graph to make this point with, but Jackson has really large collections in Q2 and Q3, and so there's a lot of opportunity to also advertise and draw tourists up during those 2 quarters into this community because they're really close anyways. And so that might be another opportunity to smooth some of these swings here. So, and that is in the report. I'm just going to go back to the data slide at the beginning. Most of the data in this report comes from the Census Bureau, and the Census Bureau actually is not terrible to access for publicly available data. If you're a data geek like me, I would encourage you to go play around with it. The Census Bureau, so we know, the decennial census happens once every 10 years. They also perform something called the American Community Survey, which is a smaller swath of the population that they take, and they look at year to year, and they produce estimates. And so you can get those estimates every year, and they break them down by geography. So you can get some of those estimates all the way down to a zip code level. And they usually lag 2 years behind, and so my best guess would be 2021. Some 2021 statistics are already out at the county level. You can get 2021 statistics already. But for smaller geographic regions, my guess is they would come out in March. The timeline of the Census Bureau publishing their data was thrown off. COVID threw it totally off, and so they were really late publishing this. The census in general, and then those estimates too. And so you can update it year to year, but you'll always have a lag of 2 years behind, really. Any other questions? Any online?
Nothing online.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, everyone. Oh, did you have a question?
Is there 100% participation between 60 to 64-year-olds?
Yeah. Yes, but you have to remember that there's a margin of error. So because it's a small sample size, there is a margin of error. So this says 100%, which is really astounding. I've never seen like 100%. But keep in mind, whatever that size, I can't remember that size of the margin of error because all of these have a margin of error, but there is that there.
For a mom who has 2 children in both of those age brackets, how am I calculated? The low 6 years old and the 6, basically, right? Elementary school, not elementary school.
The question is for a mom that has children in both of the age brackets, both under the school age and of school age. I would have to look at how they calculate that. The census publishes all of those like detailed things, and that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
Do you think data available for how much the labor force is non-English speaking?
Yes, the question is there data available for the labor force that is non-English speaking? I believe so. The Census Bureau does do really nice breakdowns, actually. You can look at labor force participation rates by race too, if you want. The population is just such a small population in Big Sky that you just don't even get a number that's big enough to compare to anything. But I believe you can look at that. I think I saw a hand somewhere in this area. Maybe not. Okay. Great. Oh.
All the respondents identify as like full-time year-round?
The question is, do all the respondents identify as full-time year-round? And the answer is yes. So you can get seasonal workforce rates, but you have to get that through the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and that only comes to a county level most of the time. So it's not a statistic that's easily available for Big Sky. So phase 2, what we're hoping to look at is of the data that we don't have, what are data variables that we can build and collect within the community? And so how can we supplement the federal data with more locally available data? And so that's kind of the next phase that we're working into. So that'll be exciting. Okay, thanks so much.
Should just mention the chamber did this data back in 2019. We knew 2 months later it was out of date. So our goal is to actually start trying to get this on an annual basis. Now, there's only so much resource we can get to get this data, and Jackie does a great job chasing it. But we also had to go into a mode that we've had to go out and hire someone to go chase this. So currently right now we're looking at a cost of living analysis, that's what she mentioned. And we're also doing a visitor impact study right now to see how much a visitor spends in town when they visit. So at this time, we have a break. 10-minute break. We'll be back here at 6:30. There is food and drinks outside. There's no alcohol. We apologize. It was supposed to be alcohol, but because there's a soccer event happening here at the school, we are not allowed to serve alcohol. So lots of non-alcoholic beverages. So we'll see you guys back in 10 minutes and we'll get going on our next phase. Check. This part's easy. It's just that arrow, and that's your laser. That's your power.
This is battery.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're going to get started, but first of all, we have a door prize, and we're going to draw that right now, which is from Vacasa, which is a $150 gift certificate. Is that right? And the winner is... No, he can't win. John Zirkle, you just won. It's rigged. It was rigged. All right. All right, well, we're going to get started. The format for the next hour now is to move pretty quick. I'm not going to actually introduce our speakers. Each of them have a slide deck. So if you want to meet that person or talk to them later, take a picture of that with your phone. We are going to bank through 5 presentations. Of these 5 presentations, we are going to ask you to hold your questions until the very end, just so that we can kind of keep the thing moving tonight and we don't go down any rabbit holes. So thank you so much for coming again. Those of you online, remember you can ask a question by emailing us at info@bigskychamber.com. Okay. You're making me feel like I didn't know it, but all right. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, as he put that neatly back in, I'm going to take it out. Okay, just like Jackie, I'm going to have to move over here. Hi, my name is Allison Brecky. I'm the Deputy Planning Officer for Gallatin County Planning. I'm fairly new to Gallatin County. Was started in February of this year. Fun, quick story about myself is I was in Bozeman for 13 years, moved away to the state of Washington for 5 years, and have moved back to Montana. So as I was watching Jackie, a lot of those stats and just, the realities of my family being able to come back, it really hits home. In addition to myself, I have my staff member, Reagan Frew, with us too, and she's actually been one of the primary staff members that's reviewing a lot of our Big Sky projects. Okay, so I apologize for those who might have heard me when I spoke to the leadership group sponsored by the Chamber earlier this year. But Gallatin County, I think we all kind of know about Gallatin County, right? And Jackie talked about these stats, but we live here, we love being here, and let's move on. Okay, along with the growth rates, she was talking about how that 99% stat for the 10-year period is crazy. Well, look at hold on, Blazer. 248 is our percentage from 2000 to 2020. So a question asked to Jackie, how can you get that recent data? I agree with her, you can't, unfortunately, unless you have groups privately funded. But it's just showing how much is changing every year. So it's just really important to not only think about that, but even like changes over months. And I will be talking about that with our work. Okay, so what do we do? Government, I feel like throughout my life I'm explaining to my friends, my family what I do. There's some misbeliefs of what government employees do. So, and I'm still learning about Gallatin County, which is very different from city, municipality government. But overall, we are charged to do certain things within the county government. There's the Planning and Community Development Department. I'm going to skip ahead to this. So we are in charge of development review, long-range planning, environment conservation, and GIS. We're doing a lot. So I know many of you, when you meet me, you're always like, wow, you must be so busy. I'm like, yes, but it's not just this. Oh, wrong button. It is, we're responsible for the growth policy for Gallatin County, for transportation plans, for all of our mapping needs for the community. So we are very busy. The busy, sometimes we tend to focus in this category a lot. And then we will get behind in this stuff, which is really, really important. As we're talking about building community, yes, projects are important. The people in the audience here that are actually putting the money forward to build things, that's very important. My department's not in charge of that. We're just reviewing it. But the piece that we really should be doing is this long-range planning. And sometimes, unfortunately, that falls behind. Okay. Also, Big Sky is not the only place that we're focusing on for Gallatin County. So we have 22 different zoning districts. It's insane. Okay, when I started the job at Gallatin County, I was like, no, this is a joke, right? This is a joke. No, it's not a joke. There are literally this many binders in my office, which I, quickly said I'm not going to use a binder, and it's all online, by the way. There's different zoning districts. There's Part 1 and Part 2 zoning districts. It essentially means how the zoning district was created. It's two different ways the state has created it. Big Sky is Part 1. Why I'm bringing this up is because it's just a lot of regulatory requirements that my staff is reviewing. It's too much. So this is when I just start kind of throwing out ideas, and I know that there are a lot of opinions and feelings about this, but when we're talking about housing and how can we make things more efficient, is this efficient? And yes, there are many people who don't want to talk about countywide zoning, but I'm telling you, this would go away, and we would start talking about how we're similar to one another instead of how we're all uniquely different, right? How Spring Hill is very different from Sipes Canyon 1, or how Sipes Canyon 1 is very different from Sipes Canyon 2. So there's my thought about that. Subdivision, really state regulations. We have our own regulations, but subdivision, when we're required to do that review, very much state-led. That's important to mention just because there's a lot of changes being talked about right now in the legislation, so stay tuned and be a part of it. Here's Big Sky. Hey, it's not just called Big Sky Zoning District, it's also Gallatin Canyon. So this district is bigger than, kind of where a lot of the activity is. But we're seeing stuff, of course, all along that area. Okay, next. Okay, I just want to make sure. Caitlin, I'm missing a chart.
You're missing a chart.
Hold on. Yeah, bummer. I might have to print out. Hold on. So I wanted to just go over the charts of the actual numbers we're seeing. So with our permitting or development review, we have zoning applications, subdivision applications, and land use permits. The last two fiscal cycles, you're seeing a pretty similar number between zoning and subdivision, but you're actually seeing a little bit less, and it might have been my fault, Caitlin, I might just have sent the wrong version. The land use numbers are really permits that are being triggered by construction. So Gallatin County does not review building code or implement building code, but we do these land use permits. And that number, so from fiscal 21, we had 140 from Big Sky. We typically see about 450 to 500 total for the entire county. So Big Sky was a big percentage. That was fiscal 21. The most recent fiscal year, it went down to 103. You're still seeing subdivision numbers about 25, so 27 in fiscal 21 and 22 in fiscal 22. And then zoning applications, that's like your conditional use permits, variances, sign permits, I think are thrown in there. That's a lower number, 10 and 15. So sorry, I didn't have that graph up here. But, as people were asking, are you seeing a change? How are the numbers changing? What are you seeing on your end? I will say in our GIS department, we are definitely seeing lower numbers for address request. So that can just indicate that we're just slowing down. I think with the pace of growth that we've had, slowing down would be refreshing. It might actually just be a little bit more closer to normal. I just want to touch on this because I'm probably, two more minutes, Caitlin? We're good? Okay, so talking about zoning, what is zoning? And again, it's really one small piece of what my department is doing. Thinking about building community. I really just want to emphasize that we're responsible to review the regulations. The regulations that are in place specific for Big Sky. There's a Gallatin Canyon Big Sky plan that was adopted in 1996. There was a capital improvement plan adopted in 2011, okay, a little better. Gallatin Canyon Big Sky zoning district regulations also adopted, same time, 96, amended in 2020, but let me tell you that amendment that went through in 2020 was just to adopt basically administrative procedures for all Part 1 zoning districts. So my point is, as you're thinking about how you want your community to look and grow, this is a very important piece. It's just not talked about a lot. Good news. So changes can come forward, going back to just our reality of our workload, staff capacity. We are also suffering from staff leaving because they can't afford living in Bozeman. It's just hard to get to these regulations on our end. People can, of course, community members, neighborhood groups can come forward and propose some changes. So that's just my point. It's just you have to really think about how a lot of the regulatory side of Big Sky is really dated. It's over 25 years old. So, and I think that was it, really, for me. Go to another slide. Did you add? Did you?
No, I think you. Forward. Sorry, forward.
Oh, forward. It's locking up every time. Oh, thank you. I added. That's right.
I checked your
Thank you, Caitlin. There it is. There's the number that I verbalized. So pretty, just between the 2 years, not a big difference. But I think this number, as we start talking about things slowing down, you're going to see this land use permit number go down. It could also be an indication that just the easy to develop land is, harder to get. So that's it. Oh, sorry, housing, real quick. Sorry, Caitlin, I'm breaking the rule. Gallatin County, we just put in a CDBG grant for a regional housing strategy. Very excited about it. We're hoping to get a $50,000 grant. We have all these great partners, including Big Sky Community Housing Trust. Thank you. And we're really hoping to get that grant, and we're going to push that forward. That was it.
Well, thank you. That's a great segue into the Big Sky Community Housing Trust. My name is David O'Connor. I'm the Executive Director of the Big Sky Community Housing Trust as of this May. And I want to shout out to Laura Seafang, the founding Executive Director of the Housing Trust, and much of what I'll be reporting on this evening were efforts that have been started over the past several years. And I have much to tell you about, so we'll get started. The Big Sky Community Housing Trust started in 2017 in doing a communal project with HRDC in Bozeman. That's the Meadowview condos that exist above Sweetgrass Meadows today. That was a project that was 50 some odd units that were sold at 50% of market rate, deed restricted, and appreciation capped. So that was our first project. We kind of called it our demonstration project to sort of proof of concept and use that as the springboard to get the housing trust formed. That was a huge success. All of those units were sold very quickly, as you may imagine. We just this year had our first resale of a unit, so we were able to test that process that was put in place, and it worked just as expected. So Meadowview is kind of our first project, and it's sort of the first step in ownership along that path of participating in the Big Sky community. So our mission is to provide a diversity of housing affordable for the community in order to grow and retain a strong base of residents and employees living in Big Sky, which will support the local economy and so on. But the key words in there are diversity of housing, affordable, residents and employees. We struggle a lot with, is our mission workforce housing, is it affordable housing, attainable housing, and it is all of those things. What we're trying to do in conjunction with and on behalf of the community is to create a housing environment that promotes the kind of community we all want to live in, and that is all of those things. So a couple of slides really quick to illustrate the problem. I won't dwell here because we know the problem. Much of the data that you'll see tonight was collected very recently through more local surveys. There was a study that was done by WSW Consulting back in 2018, and then we just did an update to those numbers for a housing needs assessment. So much of the numbers here come from that, but it just sort of illustrates how behind the eight ball we are. We've got median home prices that are just astronomical and so far removed from what affordability would be based on local wages. We've had higher than anticipated job growth. COVID drove everybody here. And so even according to projections that we had, we far exceeded those. Our community has essentially a 0% vacancy rate for long-term rentals. One of the reasons I asked that clarifying question to make sure that we weren't apples to oranges, or we had some vacancy we weren't aware of, but everybody in this room is very well aware that it's extremely difficult to find any place at any price and any configuration for rent. And it takes a long time and a lot of connections. And then this is kind of a lesser, an easy one to get by. There are really only 36 apartments, meaning an apartment building that is not single-family home owned. Our long-term rental market is 100% dependent, or almost 100% dependent on private property owners who, if you own your own property, you have all sorts of different goals that you may want to have for that, and they may not always be in line with community-based housing, and that's not property owners' fault, that's just the nature of it. What we need more of is the type of inventory that will support occupancy in this community. This is, I think, like a lot of slides, there's a lot going on here, but this is one of my favorites because this is sort of the polar star for us. This is our roadmap, and this is our spectrum of needs, and that's not a Big Sky specific. You see this a lot in housing analyses, but this says for the outer ring of here, if you want to serve these folks, these are the tools that you use to do it, and these are the tactics, right? So if you're looking to serve very low income to moderate, 30, 60 to 80% of area median income, you're probably in the realm of federal subsidies. We get asked a lot, aren't there federal grants for this kind of stuff? And there are, absolutely, but they come with pretty low income limits. Pretty heavily subsidized. We'll talk about a project in a little bit that we are doing here in Big Sky that falls into that realm. And then once you get higher on the area median income, you have different tools that you're looking to use, moving from more rental into ownership and so on. Oops, pardon me, I didn't mean to quite go from there yet. So I don't want to go through all of these this evening, but this is available on our website, and it gives you really an idea of what are the kinds of things that we need to be doing as a community to address and solve this problem. And that's tremendously helpful to us, especially as a new organization, because that says, great, here's what you need to do. Now we just need to figure out how to go do that. That's all. Here's some rental data to just kind of magnify again how far off the math really is. If the monthly rent for one person in one bedroom is $1,800 for one person, they need to be making $36 an hour to afford that. So again, you can kind of check this out. This is also available on our website, but just magnifies the issue that we know is here. Again, that math, 20% down payment at 6% for $1 million property requires a household income of $200,000, which we're just not seeing a lot. So there's problems with ownership. How we address that, we certainly have the major employers. Big Sky Resort has been the housing trust for Big Sky for decades because long before we were thinking about community housing, the resort was doing that going back to the 70s, and that's a role for major employers. Now Cross Harbor / Lone Mountain Land is taking that role on as well for their own employees, but then there's also the rest of the community as well, and what are some of the things that we can do in addition to that. So recognizing that there is a role, and the large employers have been embracing that role, building dormitories, converting hotels, and then also quite a bit of master leasing, and that's a tool that at the Housing Trust we're learning more about as well, and that's where an employer leases a rental unit on behalf of their employees, and that's something that's been happening quite a bit around the community for all sorts of employers as well. So different ways that we go about doing that. Meadowview we talked about. Riverview is an apartment complex that will be breaking ground here starting in December. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Rent Local and Good Deeds are the two programs that we have operating right now to try to chip away at this as well. We'll go into a little more detail there. So Meadowview, as we talked about, that was purchased at 50% below market, and Meadowview is deed restricted. That's one of the major tools that we use as the tools of the trade in community housing are deed restrictions. And a deed restriction is a document that's filed against a property, and it runs with the land, so it survives sales, that much like a conservation easement or a similar sort of document like that, it describes the allowed use of that property. So deed restrictions can say all sorts of things. For Meadowview, it's pretty restrictive. It says the homes must be owner occupied. There can be a second bedroom allowed sort of thing, but it does have to be owner occupied. They cannot appreciate more than 2% per year. These are not units that are designed to be investment units. These are not units that are designed for buyers to retire on. These are units designed for buyers to be able to enter the purchase market and to start that process of then moving forward. And our job is then to continue to build out the rest of that path so there is some place to go. So some new rental housing in progress. You've all noticed, just to put you kind of oriented, there's Ace Hardware, there's the post office, the ponds, and obviously the Spur Road. So Powder Light are these buildings that have gone up here. And Powder Light exemplifies one tool that we have in this community that you all as voters and the various different districts have given us. So if you recall, I don't remember the exact 3 or 4 years ago, we as a community voted to allow a 1% increase in the resort tax rate that we charge on all the things we charge resort tax on to go from 3% to 4% and use that additional 1% for infrastructure needs. And the greatest need at that time was our sewer and water district was running out of capacity, specifically, especially for water treatment. So in order to increase that capacity, that revenue was going to be used, but then a deal was hatched between the water and sewer district and the resort area district to earmark some of that new capacity for workforce housing. And so what that allows us to do is bring water to the table instead of having to bring cash always. So Powder Light was a project that Lone Mountain Land was building anyway. It was consisting of dorm suites style housing. So the Housing Trust was allowed to come to that project, bring some additional water, make that a little bit larger, and for no additional community investment, cash-wise, we're able to have access as leasing agent to 100 beds in Powder Light that we can then turn around and make available via master lease to smaller employers. Riverview also is our other major project coming. Riverview will consist of 100 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartment units, possibly some dormitory product in there as well, and that's also a co-project between us, the Housing Trust and Lone Mountain Land. So 25 of those apartments will be built using a federal grant under a program called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. Very sexy funding methods here, but it's one of the older housing funding vehicles via the federal government that allows for low-income access to apartments. So those will be breaking ground here, hopefully by the end of this year, to be completed next year. So we have a couple of programs we operate as well. Our Rent Local program designed to bridge the gap between short-term rental and long-term rental and provide cash payments to homeowners who make their properties available that way. And then our newest is our Good Deeds program, which, again, using deed restrictions. So we funded with resort tax, philanthropy, and corporate and individual donations, purchase a deed restriction from an existing property owner or somebody seeking to buy one. And this deed restriction is less restrictive. It doesn't have an income cap or a depreciation cap whatsoever, but it does specify that it must in perpetuity be occupied by workforce housing. We have 2 of those actually filed, 5 more just awaiting closing. We've spent our entire first round of funding and we are off to the races with that. So with that, I'm out of time and I will pass that on to our next speaker, but please check out our website or come see me for any additional information. Sorry, I'm not known for my brevity.
Hello, good evening, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kenny Holtz. Big Sky has been my home for about 15 of the last 20 years. And about 2 years ago, I started a firm called Fire Lookout Capital, and we've been doing some development in town and have a big project coming up and wanted to kind of lift the hood off of things and share it with you today. Our first project in town is we bought the remainder Fairways project, and with our general contractor partner, Lone Pine Builders, have been finishing that out. 5 of those 6 units have sold or are pre-sold, and we're finishing construction of the final units with an estimated completion of middle of this coming year. Our next project is a little bit higher profile and visible to all of Big Sky. It is the Yellowtail multifamily parcel on the Big Sky Golf Course between the 10th and 11th holes. And you see it as you're driving by on Highway 64. Our preliminary plat is up for review in front of the Gallatin County Commission Tuesday, October 18th. And so part of today is to just share what our plans are, and so if you've got questions or want to understand what we're up to, you can understand it a bit more. We're proposing a 35-unit condo project consisting of 12 duplex units, so 6 buildings, 12 units, and then a multifamily building that has 23 units in it. The multifamily building will have 7 units in it that will be priced affordably for locals and deed restricted in partnership with the Big Sky Community Housing Trust. This site has quite a bit of excess zoning capacity on it. It's zoned residential multifamily 3,500, and at 3.71 and change acres, it actually supports up to 44 units. These deed-restricted units for locals are not dorm style. They are meant to be homes for working professionals, families, etc. We are making use of some of the workforce housing SFEs for these workforce housing units. And then I've got a little video that just kind of gives you a better perspective of what the site looks like. Okay, a couple of highlights related to it. Unit sizes across the development are going to be 2 to 5 bedroom. The average unit size across the development is about 2,900 square feet. The height of the structures are 26 to 35 feet. The multifamily building has a portion of it that's at 35 feet. That portion that's at 35 feet or 3 stories is less than 10% of our overall site. We really tried hard not to create a development that has 35-foot structures around the entire perimeter. For example, Spanish Peaks Club condos, park condos, Morning Sun condos, Broadwater condos. Those are all structures that are hundreds of feet long at the perimeter of their properties and 35 feet tall. At the perimeter of ours, it's duplexes. They're about 26 feet tall, and most of the multifamily building is also 2 stories and 26 feet tall. From a parking and traffic perspective, we've got a lot of it. You know, there are some older condo developments throughout the Meadow Village that just aren't served by enough adequate parking. The duplexes all have 4 spaces, 2 in each garage, 2 in the driveway. The multifamily has 2 or 3 deeded spaces for each unit, plus some additional guest parking throughout the site. Sanderson Stewart has conducted a traffic analysis and determined that at peak there would be 247 trips per day, which is less than the 500 trips per day that requires a more significant traffic impact study. We're hoping to break ground at some point in the coming year, and we anticipate the project will take about 3 years. And so with that, I'm out of time. If you've got any questions, feel free to find me after this, or reach out to me or my real estate partner, Rich Jorgensen. Thank you so much.
All right. Hello, everyone. Well, that was a very cool video. I don't have any videos to go along with it, but I think that was probably new imaging for many of us. It's pretty cool. Anyway, quick update from Big Sky Resort. They always ask to share some relevant stuff. Seems like we have a lot going on this year, so I'll try and keep it to hopefully the important stuff for you. I always like to start by sharing our team, and this is a newer team that we've had for a few years. Many of you know these folks. They're in a lot of community roles and board of directors roles, committees and stuff in our community. In 2022, we have, I don't even know how many projects we have going on, but it's immense. It's more than we've ever dealt with, but try to boil it down to hopefully the important stuff, the stuff that's affecting our guest experience, our employee and team member experiences, as well as our sustainability efforts. Just start with probably the most prominent that we have going on, and obviously no big surprise that we're working on our tram replacement, which is a big deal. In '95, our existing Lone Peak tram, as many people know, is pretty bold move back then. I think it's what brought a lot of us here. It's what brought me to Big Sky. Moving on to the next chapter of that, this project is a 2-year project that we're really on track. It's crazy complex stuff that we're dealing with the foundational stuff this summer, but things are going well. This tram, I don't know if everyone has all the details, but I'll share a little bit. The general idea is it is significantly more vertical that it services. It's extremely fast. It's about 23 miles an hour when you're on it at full speed. It's really only one lift to get to it, and it's new location, so it's not multiple lifts to get there. Pretty quick with that stuff. And more importantly, the inside, it's an elegant ride. It's going to be fast, super cool, pretty fitting of our future Lone Peak experience. For many of you that are in our community this summer, you're seeing I get calls constantly where people are talking about that the peak is on fire. And it's just explosives all summer. The drilling that we have is ultimately, most of it's removed through just dust and air. So you see a lot of things happening. This is the top station. So this future image is on the tippy top, and we're still working on a lot of flying concrete daily. Going to do it as long as we can until the snow won't let us. You can see the bottom station way down in the distance down below, which is significant. You guys all see that. Anyone that's going to be up on the mountain, you're going to see that foundation this winter. The important thing is 2-year project, foundation this year, steel will be erected next summer and into the fall, and should be and will be operational for our 50th anniversary opening season next November. So pretty excited for that. Snowmaking, a little less glamorous, but probably just as important, as many of us know. We've been investing in our early season ski experience incrementally every year. Important notes, Tippy's Tumble is going to be automated this year, which is pretty significant for our early season race camps, for our early season ski experience on andesite. Couldn't be happier with that. Ambush is really, it's many things, but it's an infrastructure improvement, replacing all of our pipes, electrical, and most importantly, a new pump house for andesite, which has about twice the capacity that we're currently dealing with. So that's that image. Part of our aviation and concrete work this summer. That's at the bottom of Ambush Meadows. Safari is actually additional terrain. So a lot of times we're renovating old pipes, old systems that are antiquated, trying to get more efficient. This is brand new to us. We really want to improve upon the guest experience from the top of andesite to the front, down to the main base area. So all new automated system on Safari. That in conjunction with pacifier, I think we've done improvements on pacifier in my 26 career, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. It's now 3 times larger than it was last year, with an immense amount of grade work and explosives work. So the combo of those two things is improving the green level skier, the beginner level skier, getting from Montage Spanish Peaks, top of Andesite, back to the base area. So pretty significant and meaningful change there. And then the last piece, our folks from Lone Mountain Land Company and their teams, they're completing the Spirit Mountain snowmaking system, which is a pretty impressive system, and we're super excited to have that going full force for this fall. We're not too far away from getting snowmaking temperatures. I think we've already got a few. So investments in food and beverage and opera experience. I don't have a slide for this, but we are renovating our Peaks restaurant in the Summit Hotel, and that'll be done by opening this year. But new to us, and it just popped up yesterday, to be honest with you, that the umbrella is on. Katie, you probably saw it. Did you see that? Is our umbrella bar right in the center of our plaza, or to the side of the plaza. And this is something we've been talking about for some time. We've had to navigate a lot of things to make it happen, but it's there, and it's going to be open for this coming winter, and it's going to be enlivening our guest and opera experience in the base area. So parking, similar to what we're dealing with tonight, it's a little interesting, right? But what we experienced last year, I'm not convinced it's an every year thing for us, because COVID, we saw some interesting patterns, but it was a problem. It was an issue last year. So we've added 375 parking spots for this coming year, and we're converting the existing gold lot, which I know not everyone loves, but we believe necessary for efficiency for our parking system this coming year. So 2 meaningful moves on parking. Not the most beautiful rendering, because it's not complete, but ultimately represents some of the work that we're doing with our team member housing. This year, this is our first effort. Some of you guys heard me talk about this today on the housing forum, but this is our first go at diversifying our offerings to our team for our employee housing, and getting manager-style apartments that are fitting for different levels of positions and tenure and all those types of things. So this is coming online this winter, which we're excited to announce. Also, including and an additional 140 beds from the Huntley. I don't know if everyone has heard this, but we are ultimately converting our existing short haul of Huntley, which is 140 beds, from our guest inventory, and allocating those to our team members this year, just to get fully staffed. So it's a significant addition to our bed base for Big Sky for this coming winter, taking us to 826 up at Big Sky. Another key piece that you heard me talk about today is there are 2 more phases of this that we already have deposits in, we already have plans complete that are planned for next summer, that are going to take us to our goal of having 1,000 beds in Big Sky for the following winter. So incremental moves on that every year for us, but the important piece is that we're getting different types of employee housing and getting away from that traditional dorm style that we've lived on up to this point. And then lastly, our Forever project, and this is something that, again, it's almost taken us by storm in the company. I can't tell you how much time we spend on this project, because it reaches every project we're working on. And we focus on a little bit of an internal mantra, is that people, planet, profit focus, and that is our priorities in that order. So going after our aggressive goals that we've set of being net zero in 2030 is, the more I dig into it, the more we get into the math, it's immense. It's crazy trying to figure out how you get there. And our teams are committed to it, and it's every building that we build, every employee housing structure that we have, solar on it, like I know Matt and some of the teams are doing locally, but finding efficiencies every place we can in major conversions. This is impacting a lot of what we do every day now. So Our teams really want to hear about it. This is what they want us doing, and hopefully it's meaningful to our community as well. I think that's, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Everybody else, put it back in there. Taking it out. Thank you. All right, Matt Kidd here. We're going to change the rules a little bit for this section. So first of all, I will talk for more than 10 minutes, I promise, no matter how much she holds up the signs at us. And second of all, you ask all the questions you want. We don't have to save them to the end. If you have any question about something that I'm talking about, hopefully that's okay with the chamber team. But if you have any questions for me while I'm going through the slides, then just let me know. The Community Building Forum. What does that really mean? Why are we here? Yes, it's partly to talk about what we are physically building and how the community is physically changing. And some of you all work in construction and development, and that's really important. But it's also to talk about how we are building community within Big Sky. And I sort of couldn't be more positive about certain aspects of where we are and where I see us going with the community building happening here. I also meant to say that we've done this the last couple of years, and I think we're sort of fully over COVID. It's nice to have like a lot of people back in the room today. It was mostly Zoom 2 years ago. I think even last year we were still sitting like 6.5 feet apart or whatever that was. So it's nice to have everybody back in the room this year. For those of you that I don't know, I know a lot of you, but for those of you that I don't know, my name is Matt Kidd. I'm a managing director with Cross Harbor Capital and Lowmount Land Company. I've worked here since 2008, and for the last several years it's been full-time. Sold the house in Boston, never bother going back because I love it here and am sort of fully invested with my family in this community. The goals for today, I do have a lot to talk about, and I sort of have goals at two ends of the spectrum. One, if you've heard me talk a ton, then I still hope that I say something interesting that you get to hear today. Or maybe some of you have never heard me speak, and hopefully there will be something compelling in what we have to share tonight. So I thought I'd kind of start with some general commentary, kind of state of the market, and this is just off the cuff. I don't have the graphs, by the way. Jackie, amazing job, and the data. I don't have that degree of data to present. Allison, your data is also impressive, but some off-the-cuff commentary on kind of how I see the state of things. So demand and visitation, and I think on the one hand it's very strong. The demand, Big Sky is sort of on the map, with these other mountain towns in a way that it wasn't, certainly in 2008 when I came here for the first time, but even maybe 5 years ago. But today it is decisively, for better or for worse. But it is on the map with Jackson, with Telluride, with Aspen and the Colorado communities. But we saw demand actually being a little lighter, this year. And there was a few reasons for that at various ends of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, gas prices were high, and so fewer people were taking road trips. The park was, people thought it was going to be closed, so park visitation was way down. That impacted Big Sky. It was also the case that folks were back, traveling the world again. Europe was open. So, a lot of our community members in the 3 resort projects, Yellowstone Club, Spanish Peaks, and Moonlight, were traveling to Europe and sort of spending a little bit less time in Big Sky. A data point that is not widely known and maybe even understood, but resort, if you exclude Montage from the resort tax collections, they're actually down year over year. Which hasn't happened in a long time. Now, they're up because the Montage exists, and that brought, some other folks here. And I don't say that to scare people or anything else. The numbers are strong, but it's just an interesting anecdote that resort tax collections, over the last, year over year are actually down if you exclude the Montage. From my perspective, sort of operations, and I'm speaking to, components of our projects as well as town center businesses, talking to Taylor and Troy and others. But generally, I think actually operations in 2022 have been easier than 2021. I'm definitely going to be recruiting people from Jackson. I think it's a phenomenal idea. But I think like in the sort of post-COVID world here, it got a little easier to hire people. People came back into the workforce. It was a little easier to be, not fully staffed. We're still not fully staffed, but something closer to fully staffed than we were in 2020 and 2021. Sales are still strong. There's a lot of real estate activity that's taken place in Big Sky this year, but 7% interest rates are having a big impact. Sales are definitely slowing down across the board. That will continue with interest rates being high. I think the greater the price point of a project or a piece of property, the less direct impact there is to interest rates. What I generally see is that when you're talking about, and again, the cost of a single-family house in Big Sky is $2.5 million. If you're talking about properties directionally north of $3 million, demand is much more correlated to the stock market and where people feel confidence, and if they feel confidence in their sort of balance sheet. Below $3 million, it's definitely directly impacted by interest rates, and we see that in the market this summer with inventory sitting. If something's priced to sell, it'll sell. There's demand there. If something's overpriced, it's not going to sell. That's different than the last 2 years where stuff sold pretty much at any price. Didn't matter. If it was available, it was selling. So we're seeing the market changing. If operations has gotten easier, development and construction has just gotten even harder. I have days where and some of you would like this, but I have days where it's like we should just stop building everything. Maybe everything other than housing. We'll keep building, community locals housing, but we'll just stop building everything else. And it's not that simple. Of course, these things are very complicated, but I do see the market changing. I do think development and construction is slowing. I do think these growth dynamics around the county are slowing. Higher interest rates have a big impact, and that's what the government's doing, and it's working sort of as intended. For us, actually, we are building a lot right now, and we'll talk about some of those things, but we've started construction of almost nothing in Yellowstone Club this year, and in Spanish Peaks and Moonlight, really only things that are a continuation of something we were doing in 2021 or earlier. We're continuing those projects, but we already were, even into this year, slowing down construction. I can't really predict at the moment what happens in 23. We may slow things down even further. That definitely could happen as the market plays out here. But we've tried to do sort of our own part in slowing things down and not, again, Yellowstone Club, we started next to nothing this year, and slowing things down in Spanish Peaks and Moonlight. You might not feel that. There's still a lot of construction traffic's driving around, but in the sort of background, in the decision making, that's been what's going on. Community dynamics. Clearly we must have a lot of soccer parents in this community, and they've all been at the games tonight. I think that sadly the girls lost. I didn't check the boys' game, what happened there, but I think the sort of broader community feeling in Big Sky today is phenomenal. Like, how fun was the homecoming parade last night? And we've got a great community here. And we're here tonight in a community building forum talking about these things to make sure we nurture that, to make sure that the leaders of Big Sky are doing the things we can to nurture the great community that we have here today. So I probably should have started with this one if anybody doesn't know me. But so, with Cross Harbor and Lowmont Land Company, we have a lot of brands, a lot of people, a lot of companies, sort of working within us. This is not an org chart, because it's really not that simple. There's not a hierarchy to what we do. We're sort of supporting people, supporting the community, supporting these businesses, but under our umbrella, if you will, we have, several thousand employees living and working in Big Sky, and we're really thankful for their efforts. We encourage them to be involved in basically every organization that exists in Big Sky. This isn't necessarily every organization that exists in Big Sky, but we encourage a tremendous amount of involvement throughout our organization. And we've never once told anybody what to think. or what to do or how to vote, or it's just encourage everyone. I would encourage all of you all to be involved, be engaged. It's our community. What are we going to do with it? And that's how we sort of operate within our team. I'm thankful for all the great work that our team and these organizations do throughout this community. What time did I start?
You've been speaking for 9.5 minutes.
Ooh, longer than I thought. So I'm not going to read all of this and go into all of these details, but if anybody's interested, come talk to me and we'll go through it later. But I think it's like anytime you're sort of assessing where we are or where we're going, it's interesting to look back on where we've been and some of these accomplishments. I've worked here since 2008. I view sort of, the top section of this. This is like our company's accomplishments, dynamics at play with Big Sky Resort, and community accomplishments over these years. We've been working hard for our own company accomplishments while sort of supporting in the background the improvements the resort has made and supporting in the background the dynamics at play within the community. In 2009, there was no high school. Today we have unbelievable soccer teams. Just a couple of key things here. It was 2013 when we bought Spanish Peaks and Moonlight, and the same year that we started engaging with the Simpkins family. There's sort of a sentiment that I've shared before, but prior to 2008, you really had these 5 big projects: Yellowstone Club, Spanish Peaks, Moonlight, Town Center, and Big Sky Resort, all owned by disparate owners that hated each other and litigated with each other rather than working together on the community building that we are today so focused on. So we're proud of the accomplishments, and these things, it takes a long time to build Montage. It takes a long time to get a hospital open, and the fact that these community accomplishments have happened in the background, we're really pleased about that. I'd call out the 2009 Bozeman Airport, 342,000 passengers that year. Today it's 2 million, in the last 12 months. So that's an insane amount of growth, of people traveling into Bozeman and Big Sky. Couple other, I wanted to call out because it's so important. Some of the things that have happened in the past, creating opportunities for what we are doing today. And we worked for a long time to bring about the 2019 vote from the legislature and the governor that allowed the resort tax communities to pass that additional 1% for infrastructure. That was a big community effort that today is giving a huge tool to the expansion of the sewer district and ultimately creating community housing. But that effort goes back, from today, that effort goes back about 8 years, when we really started working on that and working with the resort and various folks in this community. And how the tax collections have gone, sort of giving financial strength and kind of a support to this community. In 2009, less than $3 million. In the last 12 months, $18 million in resort tax collections. That's unbelievable resources, that are available for our community. I'm going to just quickly give folks an update on what I call our resort projects, and then talk more about what's really more important to me today, which is our effort outside of those resort projects and all of the community building efforts that we do have underway. But within Yellowstone Club and Spanish Peaks and Moonlight, we're very focused on environmental sustainability, and we don't necessarily have the forever Big Sky sort of language down that Troy and the resort have come up with. Like, I love it. I'm totally supportive, and I don't know what it would look like for us to commit to carbon zero by 2030, but I'm going to think more about that, and I'm going to think about what that looks like. For us, what environmental sustainability looks like today, particularly from a development standpoint, how we handle our water and sewer. And it's very complicated. I could talk about this for an hour. I'm not going to, but Yellowstone, Moonlight has an entirely separate system, separate from the rest of Big Sky and the rest of Big Sky Water and Sewer District. Yellowstone Club has its own system, but we're part of the district. The Big Sky Water and Sewer District's wastewater will be the first water ever used for effluent snowmaking in the state of Montana. I hoped that we would be doing that this winter. supply chain issues. We couldn't get 2 pumps that we hoped to have, and the infrastructure won't be in place. But we have the permits, and we will use effluent snowmaking in the winter of 23-24 at the Yellowstone Club. Big Sky communities treated effluent will make snow at the Yellowstone Club, and that's the future. We're gonna figure out as a community how to do that in a bigger way across this whole market. Moonlight today has no snowmaking. We're going to use Moonlight's treated effluent for snowmaking at Moonlight. This is what our commitments are for how we handle our treated wastewater, and treat it to very high standards. You know, conservation easement. You know, we put 2,500 acres in Moonlight along the Jack Creek Road. And a lot of people thought we were going to pave it. We put 2,500 acres along the Jack Creek Road. We're never going to pave it. It's a wildlife corridor. We put almost 100 units of density. We got rid of it. That property won't be developed. This has been our approach. From a building standpoint, it's hard, admittedly. It's expensive, and therefore, you know, doesn't always make sense. But we are striving for net zero energy in all of our future projects. That's what we're aspiring to be in all of our projects. Doesn't mean we don't always get to what we're aspiring for, but that's what we're aspiring for. The one and only project, which I'll talk about in a minute, we will have a LEED certified campus, the whole project, and I'll show you guys what that project is going to look like. And this is a big one for us, particularly this time of the year. The bears are hungry, they're coming into these communities, and bears are one example of how we're just bringing an awareness of wildlife. We love the wildlife that is here in Big Sky, and we want to do everything we can to protect it. For all you guys that are hunters, if you want to know where the elk are, they're all in the Yellowstone Club right now, okay? Because they know there's no hunting, so the giant bulls are right by the gate. You'll see them when you drive by. But no, we have a big wildlife working group to sort of protect the bears and any wildlife in our communities. Why are we building hotels? That's something that, you know, sometimes people ask us, why? And admittedly, they're not simple. It's not like we just, you know, started building the Montage 2 years ago. We started working on the Montage in 2011, well before we even bought Spanish Peaks. These projects take a really long time, but our community we have a tourism-based economy. That's what you heard from Jackie. And actually those jobs numbers were more diverse than I would have expected. I would have expected even more of them to be, you know, tourism-based. But we have a tourism-based economy. But we need the infrastructure to support that. There is demand for Big Sky. We need places for people to stay. A lack of hotel keys, and I'll touch on this later, has exacerbated our housing challenges. And we knew this. I'm sorry, I want to go. We knew this, you know, 10 years ago when we started working on the Montage. But Big Sky's big from a ski acre standpoint. Almost 6,000 acres, and it has room to grow. Big Sky it's bigger than these places from a ski acre standpoint. It's smaller generally speaking, from visitation, and it's never going to be as big as these places. It's never going to be as big as Aspen in terms of skier visits and hotel keys, but we need more than what we've had. Today we have about 1,000 hotel keys, and there are plans and projects underway to add another 500 plus. And that's good. It's good for business. It'll ease our housing challenges to have more hotel product, and we'll touch on that, you know, a little bit later as well. Just real quickly, like what's going on in Spanish Peaks and Moonlight. You know, we opened Montage Big Sky in December. It's been really, really difficult. It's an unbelievable project. It's a spectacular asset for this community. It will bring, you know, one of the dynamics I talk about is like, we want just enough people, right? Not too many people, not too few people. It's hard to do that. Last summer, we probably had too many people here for where this community's infrastructure really was. You know, but we don't want to have too few people here as well. But the Montage is an economic engine for this area without being ultimately a big impact. You're talking about 100 keys and 39 residences in the main building. It's not that big. And yet it's a big economic driver. But it's been very difficult. You know, our housing challenges, our transportation challenges, just our general workforce challenges, they're enormous. But we're committed to this project and the path forward, and I have no doubt that it will be a spectacular asset for this community forever. It's open to the public, by the way, too. So anytime you want to go to dinner or to lunch or to bowling, or we got this great new rivalry room with golf simulators in there, it's spa, it's open to the public. I would encourage folks to check it out. You know, we're also under construction of a one and only, and this was kind of our vision going back a long time, that we would build these 2 hotels, one in Spanish Peaks and one in Moonlight Basin, to kind of bookend the community and provide economic sort of strength and stability to the market. And so that vision is coming to fruition here. Other than maybe something else in Town Center, it might be the only 2 hotels we ever built. You know, I'm not, you know, years ago we thought, oh, maybe there'd be more in Spanish Peaks, maybe there'd be more in Moonlight Basin. I would tell you today that's maybe one more in Moonlight, we'll see, but it's probably relatively unlikely. You know, they may be the only hotels outside of Town Center that, you know, that ultimately get built. This is a spectacular project. If you want to come out and go see it, come talk to Andy, come talk to Kevin, come talk to me. We'll take you out there and you can tour the campus. It's an unbelievable project. The clubs today have about 2,000 members. You know, they're very strong. These are people that love Big Sky. By the way, I didn't mention this yet tonight, but you know, all of our investors and everything that we do are all families. They're all people that love Big Sky in Southwest Montana and are working with us to do the best that we can to make all aspects of this community great. And that gives us a lot of strength. Our 2,000 members give us a lot of strength. You know, we have 2,000 employees. That gives us a lot of responsibility. And these dynamics drive this community in a really big way. The strength of the Yellowstone Club Community Foundation, Spanish Peaks Community Foundation, Moonlight Community Foundation, they are immensely valuable to addressing this community's needs. Like I've talked about with building off of the success of Big Sky Relief and the base, you know, those are 2 projects, 2 initiatives that there was a well-articulated need and a well-articulated plan to address that need, and the financial resources were there. That's what we have the opportunity for in this community. If we can identify the need and a plan to address the need, the resources will be there for us. Wall Mountain Land Company isn't a philanthropy, but we give a lot of money throughout the community. We do a lot of things. We sponsor a lot of things. We help out. We engage, you know, sort of everywhere we can. On that front, you know, our big community priorities, traffic and transportation. We're leaning in heavily on this with Byard. I don't know if Byard's still here, on the transportation board, and you know, some of the initiatives through with you know, alternative means of transportation. We spend a lot of time on that. Water availability and sewer solutions. I touched on that earlier. I could talk about it for hours, but it's a very important issue for this community, and we're very engaged with it. Emergency services, working with for the Jack Creek Road to be able to be an evacuation route. Working with the fire department, we have land that we've committed both at Spanish Peaks and at Moonlight Basin for future fire departments. You know, the Spanish Peaks probably happens prior to Moonlight, probably in the next, you know, 4 to 5 years, I would say, would be the timeline. Brings a lot of aspen groves and other areas into the 5-mile radius that may not exist today with the fire station. Community services, just being engaged in addressing these issues in our community. Morningstar needs help. We're going to make sure Morningstar gets the help that they need. You know, and I view that as a community responsibility, as an employer responsibility. Like, I'm amazed at the women behind Morningstar, right? They're working moms that have bootstrapped this organization into providing childcare so they can have great careers here in Big Sky, but they need some help. And we're going to make sure that we have the childcare that we need in this community. Parks and trails. I love parks and trails, and we're going to have even more better parks and trails than we have today. Governance, you know, it's a complex issue. Stuff we talked about at the housing, you know, panel today with how to deal with short-term rentals and things. I don't have the answers. I don't know if incorporation is the right thing to do or not. I don't know how else we might be able to work with Gallatin or Madison County, Maybe there's other legislative things we can do with the state, but we're asking the questions. I don't have the answers, but we're asking the questions. What's the right thing for us to do? And so we're very engaged in that. But housing, more than the rest of these combined, is where I've invested more time than anything else in the last 2 years. And I'm not going to go through everything that we talked about on the housing panel today. If you didn't have a chance to join that, I would encourage you to, because in addition to myself and David, you get to hear, and Troy, you get to hear from this guy named Michael Brown that we've been introduced to, and he's a really interesting guy and is helping us with kind of unique opportunities with housing. We're trying to think about, this is the one point I'll reiterate from earlier, but we're trying to think about opportunities with housing where there's an intersection of sort of 4 sources of capital, if you will, right? There's private investment dollars. We have those. We have money committed and available for investment in housing. There's sort of employer-sponsored dollars where there's an employer obligation to help bring housing solutions. There's public dollars and what the resort tax might bring to bear, and then private philanthropy as well. And no doubt that just like private philanthropy has had a big role with Big Sky Relief and BASE, it will have a big role in ultimately addressing our community's housing challenges. And we're thinking about the intersection and opportunities that come from those sort of 4 sources of capital and working together. But we can't do anything without land. And so that's what we've been working towards. The one other stat that I'll call out on here that hasn't been specifically mentioned tonight is just this, between 2014 and 2022, 1,000 units went into short-term rental, VRBO and Airbnb. And for our sponsors with Vacasa, like, we're really supportive. I'm not knocking Airbnb and VRBO. There's a place for it. There is a place for it. It has enabled Big Sky to grow in certain ways that are really good. But we have to push back against that number because it's too much for our community's housing needs. We estimate a deficit today of almost exactly the number of units that are in short-term rental. We know that as this community grows over the next decade, we need more housing. So over the next decade, we need 2,000 housing units. We have a lot going on to be able to address that. And I talked about this earlier, I'm going to go quick, but we have to do everything we can to protect the housing stock that exists for the purpose for which it was built. And that's the Good Deeds program, the Rent Local program, and how we work with the Housing Trust on that. We also have to do everything we can to build new supply. And as I was saying before, you can't build new supply without land. And I'm going to show you guys quickly, so I don't take up too much of your evenings. Although, Frank, I'm the last speaker. If anybody wants to leave, you can leave. You want to offend me, otherwise I'll just keep talking. Claire. Yeah, we sort of reference that at times, but that is where we and I talked about the fact that all of our investors are families. They're all people that have homes and recreate here in Big Sky. CHAP was specific money that we raised starting a couple of years ago. We call it our housing fund or housing access fund. Actually, what it technically stands for is CIP, which is a Cross Harbor euphemism, Housing Access Partners. We're trying to create housing that people have access to. And we raised about 160 million of equity a couple years ago, and that's the capital that we're using to build all of these projects. So we don't really sort of promote or use that brand, but to answer your question, that's what CHAP is. Like, whereas Big Sky Investment Holdings is our vehicle that owns Spanish Peaks and Moonlight. Town Center Investment Holdings owns the Wilson and these things. So we sort of have our investment entities, and then we execute on all this stuff. Longmont Land Company doesn't own anything. Longmont Land Company is a development management community building organization. We have our investment entities set up separately. But we're building, this might have been the one slide, Caitlin, that the formatting got off on a little bit, but we're building what will ultimately be over 1,200 units of housing. This is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time, and over 4,000 beds. And we're doing that from Big Sky to Gateway. You've seen the 2 projects in Gateway, sort of an expansion around the Gallatin Gateway Inn, and then this picture is the Gateway Village project there near the jump, where we may have as many as 350 units when it's all said and done. and those are the two gateway projects. Here in Big Sky, in addition to Bucks, which we've talked about in the past, I'm not going to go into this, Powder Light and Riverview, David did a great job explaining those projects. Just wanted to show you all a few of the other projects that we have underway. So we've been able to aggregate sort of the last two parcels over here, what we sometimes called the McBride parcel, because I can't remember his first name, but Mr. McBride owned it, and then we called it the Bow parcel because Lauren Bow owned it for a period of time. We call it Upper Whitefish or Bobsled Trail, but it's sort of the end of the road there from Upper Whitefish, and then we'll connect up to Bobsled Trail, and we'll be able to build an expansion of the South Fork neighborhood, and that's really what our vision is. And continuing, I live in South Fork. I love it. It's where locals should live, and that's the vision here, is that we can, expand that neighborhood by another 26 homes or so. Yes, sir. I don't have an answer for that question. We still possibly, like maybe if things go well next year. Otherwise, it could be 2024. Grace?
22 houses and 4 duplexes?
Actually, we haven't decided for sure. It may just be 26 houses without 26 units. Maybe a couple of them end up being duplexes there right at the end of Upper Whitefish. But 26 units is what we're looking at.
How do you get 105 beds? Multi-room. Is that what the last slide said?
Yeah, and I didn't, I'm cognizant of people's time, but with this project, and again this is like Caitlin's more tech savvy than me, but the fonts got slightly messed up here, but this is kind of showing where some stuff that we're doing is very focused on sort of dorm style housing and a seasonal workforce. Other stuff that we're doing is very focused on what we would view as community housing, locals housing, but we still count the bedrooms. So I think we get to that by saying they're approximately 4-bedroom houses, per house. Because we're still counting the bedrooms, but this just shows you across some of this different product that we're building, like where it's sort of more focused on what we would think of as community housing or locals housing versus a seasonal sort of dorm style workforce. Obviously what we've done with the Gallatin Gateway Inn is very focused on the seasonal and seasonal workforce. Any other questions on that so far? Yes.
So would folks be able to buy off of you?
We don't know the answers to that question yet. Everything that we're going to do going forward in one way or another will be done in conjunction with the Housing Trust. And I don't, we have a lot of work to do to sort of ultimately figure that out. It's still very expensive to build. We've been able to acquire this land, and for everything that I'm going to show you, we've been able to acquire this land, and that's really valuable because what I know is we got no chance of building housing without land or without water and sewer. We've got land, David's got water and sewer through the 1% resort tax, and so together we can get this stuff built. And I mean, actually, this is in the sewer district, but my point is still there that we are working with the Housing Trust on these things, and we'll come up with the right structures to do the best we can to make it available for folks. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to be more than 2 minutes, but if people want to leave, they can leave. This is Bucks T4 down here. This is Bucks T4. This is Ramshorn. This is we've built one building we call the Stillman Building behind Bucks, and we have plans to build another. With Bucks, we have our own treatment system, our own water rights, and we can expand that system with what we have. Of course, like other projects in the canyon, there's ultimately more that can be done here with the sewer district that could come through, and if we can be a part, we sort of connect to the Big Sky Water and Sewer District, then that will create even more opportunity. But even without that, we have a lot of opportunity here, just utilizing the system that exists from Bucks and the water rights that exist from Bucks. So we kind of look at this property that we bought behind Bucks and as sort of 4 different sections. And maybe some of you live near here and have been wondering what's going on with these projects. That's why I'm showing you this. So we kind of break this property into 3 different quadrants. You know, in this area, we would view it as a continuation of the Ramshorn neighborhood. You know, maybe it's another 10 or so houses that get, I can't remember exactly what the zone. Kenny was very articulate on zoning, more so than I am. But it was, you know, 10 or so houses, you know, in this area. Nothing changes up here. These would be 5-acre lots. But in this area, we would seek to rezone with the much denser community commercial zoning, which is the same as the property on the other side of Bucks here, back towards the Conoco, and have this property be a higher density property. Correct. That's what's you know, north of here. Same zoning as Lazy J South. This didn't quite come through perfectly either, but this is probably the project. I'm gonna sort of conclude with talking about Town Center, but I'm probably actually even more excited about this project than I am Town Center, if you can believe it. But we've been able, behind the Riverview project, we've been able to aggregate a few parcels, the total, you know, about 180 acres, has very good, very high zoning. The geotech is challenged over here, but we've got great parcels where we can build an awesome neighborhood of community housing right here. We've got the land, David's got the water and sewer. We're going to do a great project for this community. We're planning it out with Town Center, and I'm going to show you a couple other maps here in a minute. But with Town Center, you know, we've worked on this for a really long time. You know, it's very complex history. I'm not going to get into all of that, but you know, ultimately, it's a huge responsibility to have bought the rest of Town Center, but we accept that. We sort of we accept the responsibility that we have through that, and are excited about what we can do, you know, for the community. There are some real limitations, right? But when people think about Town Center, and I might even say right here, it totals more than 500 acres. It sounds huge, but the reality is, on the west side of the river, Town Center is already 60% developed. Of the land that the Simpkins owned on the west side of the river, it's already 60% developed. Their entitlements that they had to begin with are over 50% developed. So it's not like it's like only 10% developed. I mean, no matter how you look at it, it's over 50% developed. Now that gives us even more responsibility to do it right. We got one chance at this, you know, and we want to make sure that we do it right. So things that we're focused on, I'm going to show you some other slides here in a minute as well, but enhancing community connectivity. Town Center is where it all comes together. You know, the whole community, it all comes together right in Town Center. That's why we have our farmers markets, our Thursday night music. The original plans would have shown development in the hummocks and uplands areas. We're not going to do that. There's a small sort of extension of Grey Drake, essentially, and otherwise we're preserving hummocks and uplands, you know, largely as open space and trails. We've already built more trails in there, and I'll show you guys a couple other things on that. Huge commitment within Town Center to develop housing for local and community residents. Working with the Arts Council I should say, Arts Council and the Warren Miller Performing Arts Center, thank you, John, for being here, to think about what other arts and culture and entertainment venues, you know, we need here in Big Sky. Very focused on an expansion of open space and trails. I'm going to show you guys some other things. Big one is like enhancing access to the river. And, you know, like, it's amazing how close the river is and how rarely anybody ever goes down there and sort of uses it and accesses it. We're going to open it up. In fact, we already have. We built a trail down there. I'll show you a map of that in a second. We're going to do all of this while protecting the river and water resources, bringing sustainable design practices. You know, I don't think anybody's going to irrigate landscaping in the future of Town Center with anything but treated effluent. You know, that's part of the, you know, water and sewer solutions that we'll bring to bear here. And admittedly, we wanted to add this, you know, there will be, you know, some additional level of hotel development. We think it's good for the community with a tourism-based economy, and we're going to need that use as well. So the cool thing is, like, we're really spending a lot of time now planning out these two projects together. and looking at them both together. They're not quite adjacent, but they're very close. And I'll show you on another slide where we have trail connectivity to them. But just on these planning areas, like the yellow represents areas of dense, largely residential development. The green is largely open space, and then the red is shown. Obviously, that's the Meadow Village Center here, but the red would be, you know, areas of sort of mixed use, commercial type projects. You know, within Town Center. And by the way, I don't have anything specific to share. There's no grand announcement with Town Center. We are trying to figure it out. You know, we did the farmers markets every night, every Wednesday night this summer, trying to listen, brainstorm ideas. We got a lot of great feedback. The number one requested thing was to build a water park. I'm not sure we're going to do that, but we're working on, you know, all sorts of great things. I don't have any big announcements tonight, but I want folks to understand how we're thinking about these things. I want people to start to visualize the opportunities and the limitations, you know, that sort of exist within this land. So just pointing out a few things here. This is the one section of hummocks and uplands that's likely to be kind of an expansion of gray drake. The purple on this map notes, you know, sort of residential area. The blue is noting mixed use, so kind of continuing, you know, next to base, across from the plaza, you know, opportunities of mixed use. Not that mixed use couldn't be here as well, but we're also looking at these orange spaces as, you know, the best locations for events, recreation type facilities. We don't know what's going to happen with the rodeo arena. We're going to work on it. We're working on it now. We're trying to figure it out. We're going to work with Outlaw, and I can't say for sure that it won't happen. I can't say for sure that it will happen. We're going to work on it, and we're going to try to figure it out. Ultimately, having a rodeo will come at a cost because it takes up a lot of land, and people should understand that it's less land for anything else, housing, other events. You know, we need events. We know we need programming as a community. We saw that with the dip in activity this year. That's one of the reasons I mentioned that in terms of resort tax collections being down. We need events. We need programming to bring people here. I show by the way, this parcel is owned by Town Center, and today is zoned community, you know, recreation or whatever it is. It's possible that we could consider putting housing here and more parks here, or maybe this just becomes sort of another community park, more soccer fields, pickleball, that sort of thing, and we keep that use on sort of this side of the road. We have more work to do, but today it has actually a separate zoning than the rest of it. These different color purples aren't really that important, but the point is to show that admittedly some of what gets built in Town Center will be second homes. I can't deny that. It's sort of an economic market reality. Not everything we build will be able to be owned by a local, but a lot of what we build will be able to be community housing, and we're trying to approach that in a very intentional way. These are sort of inspirational drawings of how we might look at different types of product. The neighborhood will be dense. It will be denser than South Fork is. It's only 75 acres on that west side of the river, so it will end up being dense. We're trying to get really creative with our land planning and our architecture and the types of density that we have in the area. It will be a lot more dense than what Upland's View is today. You know, that project is really not that dense in the grand scheme of things. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious about the plans for the land next to Gray Drake. I happen to live in Gray Drake.
It would feel very similar to Gray Drake. What are your lots, 3 to 5 acres? So approximately 20 lots, 3 to 5 acres. Yeah. And it's all about access to trails and connectivity. So what this is showing with this other green is showing sort of trail connectivity and bringing sort of the dense areas into the open space. So, you know, there's a lot of us that love walking this trail along the bluff, and we moved the jack rail fence over there, and people thought we were blocking the trail. But actually what we were doing is blocking development from the trail, marking the areas that will be protected as a trail, sort of into perpetuity. This didn't have to happen. Like those all could have become private lots, and that entire trail, could have gone away. But that's not our vision for Town Center and how this project will move forward. Our vision is to keep the trail along the bluff, and in fact, we've already been expanding it with Pete Costain and his team's been out there building another circular trail that brings you down along the south the river here. So that it exists. Go walk it and check it out. Some people in other discussions have been asking me about this. Obviously, this is sort of the Uplands Hummocks trailhead. It's another area that we would see as a possible area. We don't know. It's just an idea, but a possible area for some type of an event center. Maybe it's like a amphitheater type thing. We got to figure it out. But it's the one concept we're exploring, kind of on this side on the east side of the river, if you will, in terms of having some type of facility over here in that area. Is there a question? Sorry.
No, that's me. Some things transferred and some things didn't.
Oh, that's okay. This worked. Oh, yeah, it didn't work there. Yeah, sorry. This was like we converted it, but anyway, so with the plaza here, and I think I could talk about this forever. I don't want to keep people all night, but there's a couple of lots that are platted, and if that meaning development can essentially happen on those faster than others. It may be that next year we start projects on some of these platted lots. It may take us another year before we do anything. We have to go through a full new PUD process on all of that future residential, a whole new planning process. But we're thinking about this as a sort of dense retail district where what this doesn't show is that there'd be a promenade here, sort of connecting the plaza ultimately all the way down to the river and the bluff. And this is where we would envision like a lot of engagement with the arts and culture and really interesting things happening along this promenade. Just some visuals of how we've thought about improving the engagement of a retail district. Obviously, these are very floral. It's not that floral in Big Sky all the time, but sort of inspirational imagery of what we think that how these areas can ultimately look and feel. Again, the sort of notion of who likes the Deborah Butterfield statue and the bison statue that we have and the Gibeus statue at the roundabout, and kind of building on more of that public art being engaged with how you walk through Town Center and experience these places. Further engagement of the plaza, making it truly be a place 12 months of the year that people want to go and spend time and do things outside. We do have a plan with my friend Janet to have that kiosk open and engaged all winter long, so that'll be great for the businesses over there as well. Kind of beyond some other uses, the focus on a transit hub and how vehicles move in and out of Town Center and in and around Big Sky, and the parking lot behind Tips Up and Base to me seems like a great place to build a bigger parking garage and a transit hub ultimately. The thing that we got to be creative with big parking garages. We can come up with plans to what's that? Exactly, and but that's very expensive, very expensive. But what we can do, we've started working on these efforts for Moonlight, very complicated, but we can try to create what we call a TED district, or a targeted economic development district, where we can use future tax dollars, not today's tax dollars. As I like to say, today's tax dollars, the counties and the state have spent them 6 ways to Sunday. But we can use future tax dollars to invest in infrastructure that stays in our community. So can we create a TED district around the future of Town Center and use the future tax dollars that will be created from this area to fund a parking garage that maybe has a vertical farm component to it and a transit hub attached to it. These are the ideas and the things that we're trying to, trying to work on. I wanted to kind of end with two things. One on the trails, because this is like exciting and it's happening essentially now. But through the hummocks uplands expansion and the connectivity, and then what we have, what we call with Cold Smoke, or what we sometimes call River Bend, and then connecting over to a couple of other parcels, we can develop, this will happen by next summer, a trail connectivity all the way over to Missioner Creek and to the Mud Creek trails. And so just really creating an expansion of the trail network. We are working very closely on a number of fronts with BSCO on trails. The Mountain to Meadow Trail, if people have been biking that, we are building a sort of alternative route. We got some stuff going on through Spanish Peaks that will ultimately change Mountain to Meadow, but we've got a great new sort of permanent alternative. We're working on that with Troy and the resort team as well. Pete's building it now. That's going to be another great alternative for getting down the Mountain to Meadow Trail. So my last slide is a plug on a program that sort of was conceived last year. And I haven't seen Andy Dreisbach tonight, but this was actually his daughter Charlie Sue's idea that Andy brought to our attention a year ago, and we've been able to launch this. But we call it Big Sky Futures, and I'm working on it with the Chamber. Anna and Brad have been tremendously helpful with this, where we're coming into the school and engaging with the high schoolers in Big Sky. We're talking to them about, at times, community issues, employment opportunities. There's a lot of sort of overlapping goals with this program, but it's sort of for kids to think about jobs, regardless of where they are, but jobs when they're done with school, so that they can apply the math and the algebra and the calculus that they're learning in school today to potential jobs that they'll have in the future. It's also so that they might think about those jobs being around here, so that they can actually like have a path to coming home after college. And to just also sort of prepare them for the workforce. So we're doing a speaker series throughout the school year, and then ultimately we'll have internship opportunities for the high schoolers of Big Sky. For any of you that have a need for interns, come and talk to us, and we'll get you plugged into this program. Or if you'd like to be a part of our speaker series and come and address the students, you can come and do that. I tell you, it's actually harder than this. I was a lot more nervous trying to present to the kids last week than talking to you guys tonight and trying to make sure I was having them engaged. Although actually they asked more questions than you guys did. Anyways, if you want to be a part of this program, come and talk to myself or any of the folks from the Chamber. I think it can be a great thing for this community and kind of bring in the youth of Big Sky, the students of Big Sky, further into our working world. So yeah, that was it. I can answer any other questions or anything that folks have. Sorry, I went a little long.
We do have time for some questions if people want to ask. If anybody wants to hit the road, feel free to do so. But any questions for any of our speakers this evening?
far as like updating plans, because they're, as you mentioned, a little long in the tooth, but like, how could we engage with you and start that process?
Yeah, I mean, I can leave some of my business cards here, but I think it's a really important question for this community. Because all that exciting stuff we were just doing, you know, we're gonna be working with them on just kind of figuring out how it blends with the regulations. And as we know with that growth, things are changing. We need to be looking at those documents more often. So we're gonna have to start thinking at the county level, just ways that we can bring in the community very easily to do that, so there's a community-led initiatives.
Thank you.
I would just reiterate that we're going to go slow. These are 10, 15-year projects, and we're committed to doing it right over that long period of time and with the involvement and engagement with the community. So thank you guys for listening, and sorry to be a little long-winded.